Hi guys, and welcome back to the Crochet Tour YouTube channel. In today's video I'm doing another episode of Tor Tries, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing a crochet book that I've got. So this is the book I'm going to be reviewing. It's called Prehistoric Amigurumi, and as usual I'm going to be splitting this video up into 5 main sections. So I'm going to do a section about the book itself, a section about the designers, a section about what I've made from the book. Then I'm going to talk about what I liked in the book and what I've learned from the book, and then I'll just do an overall recommendation and sum up the video at the end. So in terms of where you can find this book, I was actually given this book as a gift, I think for my birthday or maybe for Christmas, I can't quite remember, but I did look up online and I can see that you can get this on Amazon and you can get it on Waterstones as well. There might be some other websites, but those seem to be the main two that I could find it. And it looks like this book was published back in about August 2019, so it's still fairly recent, but I guess it is a few years old now. In terms of how much it cost, it looks like at the moment it's at about £14, which is kind of quite a standard price, I would say, for a crochet book. And in terms of the number of patterns that you get in here, you get 14 in total, so that's quite a good number as well of patterns to have in the book. Then in terms of the level of difficulty of the patterns in the book, so they are graded from 1 to 3 stars, with obviously 1 star being the easiest and 3 stars being the hardest patterns. If I counted correctly, then I think there were 3 patterns that were 1 star, 7 patterns that were 2 stars, and then 4 patterns that were 3 stars. So there's more in the way of intermediate patterns in terms of how they've ranked the difficulty of the patterns in this book. However, if I'm being honest, I think that they've maybe slightly overestimated how much a beginner can actually do. So if it was me that was rating all the difficulty of the patterns in this book, I personally would say that all of them are at least intermediate level. I guess beginners probably could do some of the 1 star patterns, but I still wouldn't call them easy by any stretch of the imagination. I think most of these patterns in the book are fairly challenging, so personally, I don't think this is necessarily aimed at beginners. I think this book is better for intermediate and above, but obviously if you're a beginner and you've managed to do the patterns in here, then maybe I'm wrong. It is kind of difficult for me to judge because obviously I am an advanced level crocheter and I've been crocheting for years, so it's kind of hard to remember how much I could do back in the day when I was just starting out, but I do just get the sense that the patterns in this book are more intermediate and above, in my opinion. Then in terms of the stitches used, so as with pretty much any amigurumi book, the main stitches used are going to be single crochets, increases and decreases, so that's all fairly straightforward. But there are some slightly different stitches used in this book as well. So examples of that, there's picot stitch, which I have used in some of my patterns before, and then there's crab stitch as well, which I haven't actually used that before, and I wouldn't know off the top of my head how to do a crab stitch, so there's definitely some quite obscure stitches in here that you wouldn't necessarily see very regularly in amigurumi. The good thing, however, is that there is a little QR code, at the beginning of the book it tells you all the stitches that are going to be used, and then there is a little QR code that you can scan, and I think it takes you to a video of how to do the stitch if you want to watch someone doing it. Now, I hadn't needed to use that for any of the patterns that I did in this book because I did know all of the stitches already, but I think that's a really good little addition for any beginners or intermediate level people, or even advanced if you've forgotten how to do a stitch, or like I say, I wouldn't have known how to do a crab stitch, so it might have been useful for me to see a video of that rather than just trying to understand it as written down in the book. So yeah, that's kind of all of the main information about the book. Now, in terms of the author of the book, there's not just one author like a lot of the books that I review. This is actually quite an interesting book because it seems like, reading the little introduction at the beginning, what happened is there was a competition for everyone to submit like their best prehistoric crochet pattern, and then I guess 14 of those patterns were chosen to be put in this book. So actually there's I think at the back it shows you all of the designers of all of the patterns in the book, but I think there's 10 designers for 14 patterns, so actually most of the designers only had 1 pattern in the book, and then there were just a few that had 2 patterns in the book. Now, as I say, this is quite different to other books that I usually use for crochet, which are usually just one author publishing maybe 10 to 20 of their own patterns, and I think actually it's quite good to have a variety of designers in the book because it means that in reality, probably each designer has submitted their very best pattern, or maybe their best 2 patterns, and you are more likely, I think, to have higher quality patterns in the book compared to maybe one designer who's rushing to try and get 10 to 20 designs finished, or maybe they're running out of ideas towards the end or something like that. Now, I'm not saying that that's always the case. Obviously, there are a lot of books by one crochet designer that are all really high quality. All of the patterns are high quality and consistent, but I do think that using a variety of designers in one book is probably more likely to give you higher quality patterns on the whole. But then on the flip side of that, there's sometimes some disadvantages of doing it this way as well. So some people like a book where everything in the book is of a consistent style and sort of looks the same and uses consistent techniques and things like that, whereas in a book like this, obviously there's so many different designers that are making the designs in this. You're going to get a lot of variety in this, and when I say variety, I mean variety in style, but then also variety in the crochet techniques used as well. So again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's really up to you in terms of what you prefer in a crochet book, but if you like variety and you like a lot of different patterns and you like to see different ways of maybe achieving the same thing, then I think this would be a really good book for you, because I think having all of those different designers in here really achieves that. So now I'm going to show you what I actually made from the book. So I've only made 2 patterns so far, and that's just because, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the patterns in this book are fairly involved and take quite a long time to make. Obviously, I didn't actually go for any of the 1-star patterns, so maybe some of those would have been a little bit quicker, but yeah, I feel like 2 patterns kind of gives me a good flavour of what the book is like. So I did one from the 2-star category, which is Brad the Brachiosaurus. So here's what he looks like. He is so tall I can barely fit him all on the frame, but yeah, this is Brad. He does stand up by himself as well, so using the tail and those 2 legs, if you place him on a surface, he does stand up just by himself, which is really good. And yeah, I actually have him displayed in my living room because I really like how this one looks. I like how the head looks when it's sort of tilted to the side as well, so yeah, I really like that one. And then I decided to make Gabby the cave girl as well, so this is what she looks like. She's also very big. This is the dinosaur little toy that she has with her. And if any of you have crocheted hair before, then you know how long it took me to crochet all of this. It was, like I say, quite a big project. It did take hours of work, this one, but it turned out really nicely. I really like how she looks. So yeah, those are the 2 things that I made from the book. And as always, I kind of ignored the recommendation in terms of the hook size and the yarn to use. So I think in the book it generally recommends DK yarn with anywhere between like a 2 to 3mm crochet hook, depending on what pattern you're doing, but I ignored that and I used a 4mm crochet hook with Aran weight yarn, which is kind of similar to most of the patterns that I've created on my channel as well. So yeah, obviously if you followed the instructions, then yours wouldn't come out as big as this. They'd come out a little bit smaller because you'd be using lighter weight of yarn and a smaller hook, but you can do Aran weight yarn and it still turns out really nicely, and it'll come out massive as well. So if you want a bigger item, then I'd recommend doing that, because it doesn't really affect the shape or anything, it just makes it bigger. So what I liked about this book was there were quite a few things, to be honest. The first thing, again, which I kind of touched on before, was that there's a variety of patterns in here written by a variety of different designers, and I think that's really good, and it gives you a lot of new techniques and stuff that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before, and you can just see how people sort of create the same shape in different ways. I think that's really interesting, so I like that about the book. I also quite liked that it was more aimed towards an intermediate or advanced level crocheter, because I feel like there is a lot of books on the market that are for beginners, and I feel like sometimes people that want a challenge can be kind of forgotten and there's not a lot out there for them. So like I say, I found this quite challenging. Not like I could obviously do it, but like the hair and everything like that, this one was quite a challenge to do, and I've been crocheting for years and years and years. So if you're an advanced level crocheter and you're looking for a challenge, this would be a really, really good book for you. And yeah, I feel like it's an area of crochet that there's not as many books available for advanced people, so that's another good thing that I liked about it. I liked as well that the instructions were very clear, so if you weren't necessarily advanced, you were more intermediate, I'd say, maybe not beginner but intermediate level, I think you would have still been able to follow the patterns because of the level of detail that the designers have written into it. And also adding to that as well, they've added in quite a lot of progress pictures too, so you can see how your project should be looking like at certain stages in the process of crocheting, which is really helpful because sometimes in books they'll just show you the finished product, but then you obviously don't know what it's meant to look like at certain stages in sort of crocheting it and putting everything together. So I think that's really helpful. And also as well, kind of related to that, there was quite a lot of detail given when it came to sewing the parts together as well, which again, that was very helpful because for this one, for example, if they would have just said something really generic like sew the hair to the head, I would have not really known how they got this exact effect by doing that. So the fact that they tell you exactly which rounds to sew to, and like they give you detailed instructions in terms of how to make the bun on the hair and things like that, that was very, very helpful. And I think, yeah, everyone would probably find that helpful information to have because, like I say, it's not necessarily straightforward trying to work out how everyone sewed everything together and things like that. Then I'd just like to mention a few things that I've learned from the book as well, because I always like to reflect on other people's patterns that I've done and think about how I can use sort of information that I've learned from that to improve my own patterns as well. So a few things that I learned was, on this pattern here, I learnt how to incorporate a tail into the body without actually sewing the tail on. So I don't know if you can really tell from here, but this is actually added into the round and then you crochet round the tail and then it just sort of gets added on that way rather than you sewing on the tail at the end. And I think it looks a lot better like this. It looks cleaner and it's obviously less sewing, and most people don't like the sewing part of amigurumi, so I think that was a really, really good technique, and I'm glad I learnt how to do that because I'm sure I can incorporate that into patterns in the future. Another thing I learnt was a better technique for crocheting a foot shape. Like you can see here, these are very clearly feet, and I sort of have a bit of a technique for doing this, but I think the way that this designer did it was a little bit better, and I learned a couple of tricks from that. So that was one very specific thing that I learned. And then one sort of more general thing that I learned, particularly really on this pattern, is just the impact that little details can have on the finished product, because this little dinosaur toy, plus the little necklace, the tooth necklace, plus the bone in the hair, and just all of the hair and like the little pieces of hair on the front of the head as well. I just think all of that added together makes for a really, really good, like clean looking finished product. And yeah, sometimes I can be a bit lazy and skip out on details in some of my patterns, so it's just a good reminder that it is worth investing time into adding in those little details because it does pull everything together in the end. So my overall recommendation and summary of this book, would I recommend the book? 100% yes. I think this is a really, really high quality book. There's a lot of different variety of patterns in here, and I think there's kind of something for everyone in here. I also think it's really good value for money as well, because it works out at about £1 a pattern, which I think is really good, especially for detailed patterns with a lot of pictures and things like that. I think that is really, really good value. So I would recommend it. However, I will say that, as I mentioned a couple of times already in the video, I would recommend this for intermediate to advanced level crocheters. If you're a beginner, I probably wouldn't go for this, only because I think it might be a bit disheartening if you're not able to complete some of the patterns in this book. Now, obviously, if you're really ambitious and you want to have a go, then fine, have a go, but I do think there's a lot more better books out there for beginner level crocheters, and then I think you could work your way up to this. So that's just my personal recommendation. Again, if you're a beginner and you want to try it, then don't be put off by what I'm saying, but I just feel like when I was a beginner, this probably would have been a bit too much for me at that stage of sort of learning how to crochet. And yeah, I also think this is quite a unique theme for a book as well, so I don't see many books around that are specifically for prehistoric crochet, so if you want something that's a little bit different, then I think this book kind of gives you that as well. So yeah, that's sort of my overall recommendation and summary of the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed this book review. I really enjoy doing book reviews actually. Sometimes, I think I've mentioned this before, but it's nice to take a bit of a break from designing your own patterns and just do some other patterns from other people, and you learn a lot through doing that as well. So yeah, if there's any other crochet books that you want me to review, just leave them in the comments below. I have got quite a few that I'm sort of working my way through and making sure that I do a few patterns of each of them so that I can do a fair review of them. So yeah, there's another video I think on my channel with the books I got for Christmas, so I'm still working my way through those at the moment. But yeah, if there's any specific ones that you want a review on, then just leave it down below. And of course, if you have this book, let me know how you like it and let me know what you've made from it. You could send me a picture as well if you want on my Instagram too. I'd love to see what you've made from this book. But yeah, that's going to wrap up this video. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.